Perfect. Okay, well, I'd like to sort of start by reiterating the thanks that everyone seems to be giving towards the organizers of the workshop. I'm a graduate student. I have not organized a workshop of this scope, but I can still appreciate that I imagine that a lot of work goes into it. And so I guess we'll hear this again, but they've done a terrific job getting a good slate of speakers together and making sure everything runs smoothly. I'd like to take my 20 minutes, maybe I'll even go for 18, today to talk about the Archaeological Recording Kit, or ARC, and its potential for browser-based data entry and dissemination on tablet devices. So I'll begin by briefly outlining the technical specs of ARC. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I will cover a little bit about its technical specifications and its history of development, and then I'll discuss some of the problems of adapting ARC for the growing use of tablets. And I'll finish up by looking at a few case studies using the ARC system on tablets to get an idea of some of the potentials, but also some of the pitfalls of such an approach. So I guess to start, what's an ARC? According to the official blurb online, the Archaeological Recording Kit, or ARC, is a web-based data toolkit for the collection, storage, and dissemination of archaeological data. So what that means is that it's a series of scripts that include tools for data creating, editing, and viewing in an entire system which is administered through web browsers. It's an open source code base which is available on SourceForge. It's been developed using the Apache MySQL and PHP package. Initially, it's been in development since 2004. So initially, that was a LAMP package working on Linux systems. As many of you may know, we can now get PHP, MySQL, and Apache on Windows or Mac servers as well. So it's now sort of, it can be on your laptop. It's everywhere. It uses a simple entity attribute value system in which fragments of data of different types are linked to a primary key. So in most cases for excavation, this might be the context, or locus, or bucket, or unit, or whatever we might want to call it. In the back end, there's a series of very abstract tables. So all text fragments are held in a single table with all of the text fragments. All dates are held in a single table of dates, all actions in a single table of actions, and so on. And so what we get in this kind of post-it version of how it works is the PHP code is pulling on the fly all of the fragments which may relate to a specific record and displaying them however you might please in the web browser. Some of the advantages of this is we can pull whatever fragments we want depending on who's viewing. So some users can see some fragments, some users can view others. You can pull different fragments if you're editing as opposed to viewing the data, as opposed to searching the data. You can pull fragments with labels for the data fields in different languages. So it's really a very extensible system to try and pull this data as we go. In terms of the codes and the configuration, ARC is developed in a modular system, so there's different modules for different types of record. Basically, most excavations would use a context or some version of a context module. Some might use site photos, some might use plans or drawings, samples, human remains. And the idea behind the development is really that projects can sort of pick and choose which modules they might want and download sort of a zipped package and either install samples if they want to install samples. If they're not interested in doing samples, they could install a different module as it was. It also means that projects can sort of pick and choose what parts of the functionality they might want to use and either edit existing modules or develop their own modules, which then, because this is an open source project, can go back into the code base. So you can sort of say, I want to do my samples like this project over here is doing samples, but I want to do my photographs like this project over here is recording photographs. And you can sort of pick and choose the system that works best for you. This sort of modular hodgepodge of PHP, Apache, MySQL emerged from, it's released by a company called LP Archaeology that I worked for before starting my doctorate. That they're based in the UK, they have a main office in London and several satellite offices. And this sort of code emerged in 2004, 2005 out of the larger code base of Fasti Online. Fasti Online is an online gazetteer and sort of publication source for excavation results that started in Italy. It's released by the International Association for Classical Archaeology, and in 2000 they sort of decided that publishing all of these excavation results in paper form was simply no longer viable, and so moved to an online system for the publication of this information. And it began in Italy. So we can see on the right here, the map of Italy has a lot of red dots on it. Each of those dots refer to a site and its associated information. But it's since expanded to over 10 countries sort of around the Mediterranean. And so LP produced FASTI Online, but LP is also a commercial unit. And so at some point there was a push to try and get from this code, this web-based FASTI Online thing where users are entering their site information, to some kind of recording system for archaeological excavations on commercial sites as well. We can see that it's gone through a lot of changes. The web does not look the same as it did in 2004. In fact, you can't even get screenshots in 2004 particularly clearly, apparently, as we can see on the left. And so there's been a series of changes to this process over time, but it was kind of driven by all the things that we'll hear again and again today, these sort of attempts for greater reflexivity, for giving greater voice to excavators, making digital tools that actually help excavators to understand more things at the trial's edge, sort of maintaining these theories of thought. So the system was designed to have multiple levels of interpretation so that you can tag on additional interpretive text or additional fragments of interpretive text without deleting or sort of superseding previous people's interpretations. A lot of sort of nice ideas and a lot of discussions at the pub about how we should make this sort of better type of digital system and how that might work. And so ARC is obviously not the only nor the first system for managing archaeological data, not when it was created and certainly not now. However, the system was nonetheless adopted by a broad geographic spread of archaeological research projects. And so this map shows us sort of a real Mediterranean-wide use of this system to some degree to manage archaeological data. Why might this be the case? Well, for one, it's free. A lot of archaeological projects like free and existing systems to manage their data. And the fact that it's open source allows projects to sort of tweak or not tweak as much as they please. So the tweaking and this customizability, so there's a sort of a key set of functionality, and then projects can tweak them based on their own recording. And so it's a recording system which is not impacting or enforcing any sort of standardized recording on archaeological projects. And so I think a lot of these, if you have a geographic range like this from sort of the early projects using the system at Chersonesos in the Crimea or Villamagna in central Italy, but then spreading out, these projects have different recording needs, and so I think they're sort of attracted to this ability to pick and choose the thing that they want. Also conveniently, because it is web-based, you're sort of eliminating the step between data collection and data dissemination because the data is all ready for dissemination at the time it's collected. And so it's just a question of taking your sort of site server, plugging it into your university server, changing 3 or 4 lines of PHP configuration, and your data is already live. And so there's this sort of immediacy between data capture and data dissemination. So that's all well and good. And as I've said, ARC began development in 2004, but this is going to spring a bit of a time ghost on the audience, but this is before like Facebook. Facebook in 2004 is only available to Harvard. There's no Twitter, surely. Instagram, nope, not on the menu. Google is not used for calendars or mail at this point. It's not even public. And in the UK anyway, the discussion of what we should be doing with archaeological recording was fixated on these pens that format things in rich text. And so it's not like sitting around the pub in the site hut in 2004, we thought, what can we develop which will be used on like tablet computers that look like this so we can write data? It wasn't on my radar. I guess the rest of the development team's going to tell me that it was on their radar, but absolutely no, not even in my mind that this is the thing we'd be discussing in 10 years' time. Also, I guess a problem, it's a small development team, and managing open source software for archaeologists in particular is a sort of costly and time-consuming process. And so how to make this existing package work with this new technology without either sort of alienating or cutting loose all of our existing projects, anything we develop now has to be somehow backwards compatible, otherwise these people that have sort of stuck with us for years are getting absolutely no benefits from the latest technology or development. How do we keep the system completely customizable? It's very easy, I think. okay, it's not very easy, but it's easier to create a bespoke system for a single excavation. It's harder to create a system which could be applied to 15 excavations that all have completely different data structures. And so it really leads us to the question of, realistically, how can we integrate this system with browser-based collection and tablets? What can we do to make this work? And is this sort of bespoke coding specifically for tablet applications something we should be thinking about, or are these things that, or is there another alternative? So I'd like to use the sort of last 10-ish minutes of my time to look at 4 sort of examples from the commercial sector in the UK, from public outreach also in the UK, from research projects sort of around the Mediterranean, and in teaching at Brown University to get some idea of what types of things we might be able to do to make these things work, tablets plus Arc. Most of these projects are not projects I'm directly involved in, so caveat my thanks to those administering the systems at each for their feedback and comments, and if I cock it up, that's of course entirely my fault. So we'll start. Arc was developed by a commercial unit, so we'll start with a commercial example, and excavations that are currently ongoing at 100 Minories, a site in the city of London. So we can see the Tower of London there. It is a central London, and sort of to the bottom left of this photo is the 100 Minories site. It's developer funded. It's going to turn into a hotel. And the site was subject to evaluation in 2012, in the basement of existing buildings, some very, very deep trenches. It's a location which is immediately to the east of the Roman city walls, so it sort of cuts across the ditch, which was on the outskirts of the Roman city walls. So we get stratigraphic deposits even in the basement of the existing building to depths of 2 meters. So it's sort of a, I mean, if you want like urban CRM or rescue archaeology, this is like your poster child for rescue archaeology. And the excavations are continuing. They began in 2014 of the entire open area of the site and will finish presumably sometime this spring or early summer. This is an environment where obviously live data entry is key. I mean, they're under a serious time pressure. There is piling and construction works going on around the archaeologists. Literally, they're digging in one area, and there's like a machine over there pounding things into the ground. So it's really a question of getting as much information and as quickly as possible. So this project relies on existing 3G signals in the City of London to actually enter their data live onto an offsite server. Because we're dealing with rescue excavations in this area, an entirely paperless system isn't possible. The archive requirements for the Museum of London, as with all local authorities in the UK, require a paper archive, and it has to look a certain way. And so there's no real point of doing all of the data entry digitally, because you'd then have to go and write out the paper archive on these pro forma sheets afterwards anyway. And so there's sort of this weird, like, we talk about going paperless in situations where we can choose what to do, but in situations where someone is sort of prescribing what to do, obviously we have different requirements. But what they can do is get rid of these 8,000 registers of things, of how many photos you have, how many samples you have, how many contexts you have, because the archives don't want any of that. So if we see its example on the right, it's just a very pared down functionality using the browser's own CSS or styling functionality to really strip things down so that it's a very simple system. On the tablet, you can click on it, you can say, I'm creating a new photo, it's called this, or I'm creating a new context, it's called this. So starting to move away from some of these 8,000 paper records without going fully paperless. And unfortunately, for the same reason that you can't have entirely paperless system in commercial archaeology, you can't have entirely digital photos either. You need to take bracketed photos. I'm not sure if it's still the case, but it was as late as 2012 that you had to create slides or microfiche photos for everything that you're doing. And so there's really no option of taking the photos with your tablets, but you can at least record that you're taking those photos. And part of the effectiveness of this system is even just giving the list of the things, specialists are coming from the Museum of London to sort of look at materials as and when they're uncovered. And so even having a live register of finds that the specialists from the museum can be accessing at the same time as the excavations are ongoing, it's sort of already increasing this communication between the diggers on site and the people that need to be looking at their materials. Looking at a second example from, I guess, public archaeology or outreach, the Dig Ventures project is a system of crowdfunding for archaeological excavations in the UK. And they started working at Flag Fen, which is a sort of waterlogged site, Bronze Age, really, really cool. And since 2013, they've been working at Leiston Abbey, which is a medieval abbey in Suffolk. And so in 2013, the entire excavations were crowdfunded. People paid a certain amount. They might go for a day, they might go for a weekend, they might go for a week to get some basic sort of skills in archaeological recording. And just sort of, you get to live in a tent. It's like, it's Britain, people of time team, everyone gets to participate. And this is sort of a great community building exercise. And in 2014, they're maintaining that crowdfunding and have also expanded the project with Heritage Lottery funding. And in this case, ARC is actually used for all of the data collection. They don't have the same archival requirements. They're also writing things out by hand after the fact. What's interesting about this is that because ARC is web-based, they're able to embed the entire data collection system with this wider crowdfunding platform and sort of outreach website. And so there's sort of a seamless integration between the latest pictures of finds and blog entries or pictures of the camp or news about the latest lectures on site. So it's sort of this way of the project staying completely in touch with their funders, who are the people who are continuing to pay for them in subsequent years, and getting that information. As soon as an object comes out of the ground, it's photographed on a tablet. So as soon as this point of discovery is made, the funders, if they're watching online, can be aware of this point of discovery. So it's really taking away this difference or this sort of space between excavation and dissemination. And so I think that's particularly effective for them because then they can also tell their funders, give me some money, and as soon as something comes out of the ground, you'll be the first to know. In terms of research, this is a great photo I've borrowed from the Gabby Facebook page because it shows like every type of digital recording in one photo. Interestingly, research projects really drove ARC development in the early stages, but have not really been at the forefront in terms of use of tablets. Why might this be the case? Well, a couple of the early adopters who really suffered through the early bleeding edge years of ARC development are no longer in the field actively. And so the Villamania project is preparing for final publication. The project at Chersonesos, because of the political situation, is unable to be completing fieldwork in the Crimea right now. But sort of this is also a wider problem that this is a web-based system and most sites don't have the web. And even those that do have local Wi-Fi networks, you need to have a power source with a Wi-Fi network adjacent to wherever you're excavating. And so as a result, a lot of the sites like Petra, it's for field walking. If you're wandering around the fields, you don't have access to the server, which is back at the site hut. However, there are a number of sort of second generation projects that are beginning to explore tablet options. So I've chosen this photo of Gabby because they are now using the existing ARC functionality to do their data entry over the local wireless network. Rachel is here. I can see her in the audience, and she would probably speak to this much better than I would because she has the direct firsthand experience. Similarly, a project at Hadriansville at Tivoli that launched last year through Columbia attempted to do sort of a combination, a hybrid of FileMaker recording and this sort of wireless entry. As a sort of backup, they had these FileMaker systems that would then import directly into the ARC system. This, to be honest, probably didn't work very well. Why add an additional step to your workflow if it's actually not giving you any additional functionality? Similarly, a project at Bularegia in Tunisia, which is starting, which I'm the field director for in June, all things going well, will be using the same thing, a system of tablets connecting to a local Wi-Fi and a pared down style sheet to sort of give the basic functionality and data capture as needed. A last very quick example, which I sort of thought I'd play with in preparation for this workshop, was to explore the use of ARC and tablets for teaching on Brown's campus. Brown annually runs a course called the Archaeology of College Hill, where we teach students how to dig up one of Brown's greens. We dig a big hole. The grounds crew loves us. And I taught this class last autumn, so I thought I'd use it as an opportunity to see this sort of data entry again over local wireless directly into a browser and an offsite server. This sort of might have been overkill. In 2014, we opened 2 trenches, and one had 5 contexts, and the other one had 7. So convincing the undergrads that it was really important we stay on top of our data entry for our 5 sheets was problematic. And also, ironically, the lab, when we really wanted to go and access information, seems to be like the only dead spot for both 3G and the Brown Wireless network in all of campus. So we sort of had everything and then ended up using the iPad to play like offline playlists on Spotify. So in that case, it was not terribly successful, but I think that we'll try and get the archived information from the previous 3 years into a system like this so that next year when they're teaching, they're able to actually have some idea of what's going on. So it's called ARC. I had to put one Indiana Jones thing in. To conclude, how might we continue to mobilize ARC for a digital future? It's open. I don't have any idea what's going on in this, by the way, but it's the first thing that came up. You type in like mobilize ARC digital future, and this dude on Flickr has done this. Obviously, it's an open source development platform, so the good thing is that like I don't have to know. I mean, I can say a thing, and this is going to be my opinion, but people can mobilize ARC for whatever digital futures they see. I wonder, looking forward, whether the time to sort of develop standalone tools that allow offline data capture are really kind of past. I think there are probably things that do this better and that have a longer history of development than the ARC team is ever going to realistically be able to tackle at this time. I also think the most prolific ARC projects have 3G or local wireless available, in which case, we're going to cater to those users first. And so the things that are most important to them are not necessarily standalone tablet apps. But more importantly, I sort of wonder, if we look at the last 10 years from no Facebook and ARC, which is sort of the same as it was 10 years ago, and Facebook and ARC, or whatever, this rapid change of development and also availability of online data, whether or not moving more towards sort of a direct entry to offsite service is actually going to become more possible. We have better wireless networks than we had. More areas have 3G. Rural Peru doesn't, but like I wonder whether or not in 5 years or whatever we're going to be able to be doing more of this type of offsite access, and thus at this point, at least for this project, focusing on some sort of local development is not really the way to go. And thus time spent customizing ARC CSS for more responsive design and developing sort of AJAX things, or making sure everything's bootstrapped, that the style can be edited quickly so that we can access things on tablets is going to be more sort of bang for your buck. I think I'm 1 or 2 minutes over, so apologies for that. But for more information, there's some information here, and I'd be happy, if we have time, to answer any questions. Thank you.
We maybe have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Hi, I'm Steve Wernke. So just a really elementary question. I mean, basically, how are spatial representations linked to the data in the system? So your polygons from a total station, for example, or any kind of spatial representation?
There's sort of 2 options. Some projects install map server as part of the code package. Map server, which is a thing out of University of Minnesota, it's sort of a package for displaying spatial data, but it's also configured to pull WMS or WFS layers from any sort of online serving of data. So it can pull in Google Maps, it can pull in, if you've got like a Esri sort of online data server thing, it can pull that in. It just needs the address of where that information is.
I'm thinking more about, so on site when you're digging, there's somebody mapping stuff. So how does that data get linked to this attribute data?
I mean, it depends on what, it's sort of project by project, because it's customizable. So in the projects I've been involved in, people will digitize whatever their plans are in ArcGIS, or some projects use QGIS because we like to be open. And then there's a single unique identifier that you tag those shapefiles or polygons or whatever. So each polygon tagged with a context number will be pulled live via this WFS to link to that context number.